Hey there, I'm Father Roderick and thanks for watching. In this video I'm going to give you my thoughts and my review of Season 2 of The Clone Wars. I'm currently watching the entire series, 6 seasons, to prepare for the launch, of course, of Season 7 of The Clone Wars. I am way behind on almost any other Star Wars fan because I was unable to watch the Clone Wars because it wasn't available where I lived. Unless you would buy very expensive DVDs or Blu-rays. But I do want to be ready for Season 7 because the trailer looked absolutely amazing. If you've missed my initial reaction, even though back then when I was reacting to the trailer for Season 7, I had only watched the first season. But if you want to check it out, here is a link up there that you can click. So, I worked my way through Season 2. I'm watching The Clone Wars in chronological order. So that means that sometimes the order is a little bit different and there are some episodes from other seasons that are inserted, let's say, in the order in which I'm viewing the episodes. But all in all, most of Season 2 I will be able to review. I've also almost finished Season 3, so if you want to see my review of Season 3, and I have some very strong opinions about that season, then make sure to subscribe to this channel and click the bell button to be notified when that review will be live. Probably tomorrow, maybe already, or otherwise just in a few days from now. So let's start with what I loved about Season 2. Now, I wasn't a big fan of Season 1, let alone of the theatrical Clone Wars movie. I thought it had a bit of a slow start. Everything looked a bit generic. There were some good episodes, but also a lot of, well, weaker ones. Season 2 changes that and really starts to develop some of the characters. There are still some filler episodes, but what I like is that Season 2 already starts to introduce these usually 3-part storylines. And the highlight of this season for me is the Mandalore Storyline. 3 episodes that gives us background and does something that I think Clone Wars introduced, I think, in when it comes to these animated series about Star Wars, and that is world building. It really expands the world that we knew of and that was mentioned sometimes in throwaway lines in the movies and then was developed also a little bit in the novels. But here we get to see a lot of the backstory of important planets, and that in itself informs us and informs also our enjoyment of the original movies. And that's always something I like when backstories like these or the novels fill in things that are mentioned but you don't really know, and it doesn't really matter to be able to follow the movie, but still, once you know what was truly going on, it gets so much more depth. And for me, the Mandalore storyline in Season 2 was especially cool and fascinating because, of course, we have seen the Mandalore warriors in The Mandalorian. And when we see the Mandalorian, they are basically hiding. Something terrible has happened to their planet. And so it was a big surprise for me to see the backstory of not even a long time ago. This is still relatively recent history for the Star Wars galaxy. But to see what Mandalore looked like when it was actually at the height of civilization in a certain way. They had abandoned their old warrior ways. There is truly the desire to renew the planet, to renew the people, even to renew the culture, you could say. And so they're definitely searching for peace, but then these episodes also introduce the Death Watch, or what is it called? This group of Mandalorian warriors that choose violence and that kind of go countercurrent, and of course are setting up something that will probably develop in future seasons. I can't wait to see what will happen. What I also really liked about Season 2 is that the story becomes, at least in a number of episodes, I would say at least half of them, much more serious, a bit darker, sometimes grim and more violent. I was even taken aback sometimes by the stuff that happened. Like there is an episode in which someone is tortured. There are some, point blank executions. We have the zombie episodes. I'll get to, or the zombie episode. I'll get to that one. But pretty scary stuff for a series that is geared initially towards kids. And the first season was so much geared towards kids that it even, made me want to stop watching. But in this season, you already see some hints, and then of course I've already watched most of season 3. In season 3, it gets even better. But the story feels much more like a real Star Wars story, including the dark parts of it. So the world building in this second season is really good. It varies a little bit. There are some parts that, well, they try some stuff, and you can still feel that they are kind of figuring out what tone they should strike and where they should take the story. But all in all, I would say at the end of the second season, pretty good stuff. First episode, Cad Bane, really cool character. I think that, yes, I always have to think, is he also appearing in later episodes in season 2, because I'm watching some stuff out of order, or actually I'm watching it in the right order, in the chronological order. He's cool at the same time, very much a cartoon character. There were some people that were absolutely convinced that in one of those later episodes of season 1 of The Mandalorian, you have this mystery figure. It's not identified who it is, who approaches she was also a bounty hunter or a spy that was shot at one point, and then you hear the spurs and you see boots and a mantle, and some people were convinced it was Cad Bane. I don't think so. I don't think we're going to see Cad Bane in The Mandalorian. I would be super surprised, because it's just his whole face. He's a cowboy, but it's a little bit over the top, and I kind of feel that it works in a cartoon or in an animated series. I don't think this would work in a real live version. They would have to make him more realistic. Then he wouldn't look like the Cad Bane that people are used to. So my bets are still on the return of Boba Fett in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Let me know what you think in the comments below, whether you think we'll see Cad Bane in The Mandalorian or not. That's also true about other things that I discussed. You may not agree. You may have additional points to make. I'd love to get a conversation going in the comments. So, what I also saw immediately was how nice this second season looks. I was a bit critical in my previous review of season 1 when it comes to the animation, and some of the sets, the digital sets, looked a bit empty, generic. A lot of these planets just same background in every. I just thought that they didn't do a very good job. Season 2 is visually so much better, more interesting. There are still sometimes these empty scenes, or like they are rehashing certain digital environments, and I can understand, because it's of course also a budgetary thing, that if you build an entire digital set and you paint it and you color it, well, of course you want to use it as much as you can. But I felt that in the second season there's much less repetition, and some planets look really spectacular, especially in the last few episodes. The lighting, also digital lighting, the colors, fantastic, really, really great. And I know that this is only going to get better. Season 3 is, I would say, visually on par with season 2. But then I heard that season 4 and season 5 really take the animation to the next level. So can't wait to see that. Let's talk about 2 episodes that I really enjoyed. Both of them are not that important for the overall storyline, if there is one at this point in the series. But I loved episode 208, Brain Invaders. Actually, that's the only episode that made me think of Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan. Now, if you are just a Star Wars fan and you have not watched that movie, then maybe that would be a good movie to watch to, become a Star Trek fan. But remember, in The Wrath of Khan, they have these critters, like very creepy creatures that enter the ear and then take over the brain of the people whose brain they invade, actually. Well, here it's exactly the same idea. You get these slithering snake or slug-like creatures that enter through the nose, which is, I mean, I was really appalled by the idea of an insect going into your ear, but through the nose. Yuck. Just equally awesome and gruesome. But what I really loved was the kind of the tension. You can't trust anyone, and you don't always immediately see who is a zombie or who has been turned into a zombie or not. I was also glad that some people could be saved. That there's also a way to kind of extract these brain controlling creatures. And there were some, even with the lighting and just the dramatic setting, they did a great job, I think, to make it really scary. And as I said before, I was taken aback a little bit because pretty scary for kids. But maybe kids today are a bit more resistant to this stuff than I was as a kid. The other episode is 2010, The Deserter. I really love that story, and it almost felt like that could have been a plotline for the Mandalorian TV series. It was small. It was a nice personal story of one of these clones that decides to step away from the war. It basically betrays, I think, his job as a soldier. Although you can, of course, wonder if these clones have had any free decision when it comes to being a clone soldier. But anyway, he has he now has a wife and kids, and I thought I didn't expect this kind of storyline, and I really liked it. I also liked that his decision to step away from the war was respected, and that he wasn't persecuted for it. So that was a nice, unexpected little plot line. Well, now let's go to the meat of the second season, the Mandalore storyline. Oh my gosh, how I loved that storyline. I'm talking about the storyline. I love the storyline. I was not as appreciative of the, let's say, the visuals. I thought Mandalore looked, in many ways, a bit similar to Coruscant. I'm just really not a fan of the female leader of the Mandalorians. I forgot her name. Was it Satine? Satine, this old flame of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which, by the way, actually, that was something that I really liked. That they told us that good old Obi-Wan had fallen in love with this lady a long time ago, and I'm not certain if that was before he became a Jedi. But I thought it was interesting. It kind of humanized Obi-Wan Kenobi in this series, and also in the movies, at least in the prequels. He always seems like this, perfectly nice, obedient Jedi, always a tad bit more prudent than his apprentice Anakin, but also, because of that, a little bit boring. And now we discover that there's more to this Obi-Wan, and the dialogue was well written, and I loved the back and forth between these two former lovers. That was really well done. But again, just visually, it still felt very cartoonish, this entire world. And Satine herself, I don't know, there's something about these robes that she wears. I guess they try to do a little bit, the same thing as they did with Amidala on Naboo, but here it just doesn't work. It feels a bit too, I don't know, too distant, too artificial. The colors are, I don't know, just weird. I don't like the look of that. It didn't look as realistic as some of the other environments that they created further on in season 2. The other part, of course, of this Mandalore plot was the Death Watch group that we get to know. I love the armor and just this is actually what I associated with Mandalorians way before the Mandalorian TV series, just knowing a little bit of their back history from the novels and from, of course, well, Boba Fett wearing a Mandalorian armor. So I always thought that Mandalorians were just, violent mercenaries or soldiers or whatever. I kind of like the Mandalorians that we get to know in the TV series. And I was a little bit surprised that actually Mandalore had this very peaceful time. And I'm pretty sure that will end sometime soon in one of these seasons. Anyway, no spoilers in the comments yet, at least for what comes. But I love that confrontation with Obi-Wan. Then this whole back and forth between Obi-Wan and Satine in Voyage of Temptation. Kind of the title Voyage of Temptation promised more than we were given. I thought it was a little bit, it sounds like Temptation Island. Well, it was none of that. I think that Obi-Wan and Satine actually handled it pretty well, and Obi-Wan very much, could have been a priest, It's like, I have many colleagues that have had their girlfriends before they entered seminary, but they still have very, good, chaste relationships with their former girlfriends. And this felt a bit like that. Obi-Wan had a different vocation, and he dedicated himself to the ways of the Jedi. And it doesn't mean that there isn't still a little bit of romantic tension left between these two former lovers, but they're both committed to the life that they've chosen. And I appreciate the nuanced way in which the series portrayed that relationship. Then 214, so 214, the Duchess of Mandalore. That was okay. Then there are some episodes that I don't remember that well. So I've got some notes here. I'm reading from my iPad. And so I've only taken notes for the episodes that really were, highlights for me. And maybe I'm forgetting some important ones. So again, let me know in the comments. I loved Death Trap 220 because it introduced Boba Fett and Aurra Sing. Now, this leads up to the finale. Or the season finale at least. And I had no idea that we would see Aurra Sing. Now, Aurra Sing is a character that is actually from the old expanded universe. I remember when I was still in seminary, or maybe when I'd just been ordained, they were trying to revive the whole, the novels. They were trying to do something multimedia, let's say something cross-medial, with books, with comics, with video games, and Lucasfilm really tried to create an event. Of course, there were no movies at the time, and so they wanted to, rekindle the Star Wars franchise, and so they came up with this evil guy. I remember there was this book you saw this evil guy, all green like an alien face. What was it called again? Something with Empire. I forgot to jot it down. But anyway, so I think it's in that storyline that they introduced Aurra Sing as a bounty hunter, or maybe not. Maybe I'm getting confused. Was it from something Empire? I need to look that up. That's the advantage of having an iPad. I can just Google it. Aurra Sing, when was she introduced? I'm pretty sure it was then, but maybe I'm wrong. And so what they tried to do back then, at least I remember that from the press interviews, etc. They wanted to have a very cool female bounty hunter. It was already at the time that they felt that Star Wars was a little bit too male-oriented, not many important roles for the women, and so they wanted to create a bigger let's do some really dangerous women here. Let's see, when was she? Oh no, I was totally wrong. She was introduced on Tatooine, where she watched the Boonta Eve classic pod race during the Trade Federation's invasion of the planet Naboo. And then so she is actually from the prequels. So I wonder if I completely made that up with the other thing. Anyway, again, I should do my homework before I record these episodes, but let me know if she's also in one of those expanded universe things. So Aurra Sing, still pretty cool to see her in this series, and to give her a little bit of a more important role, at least, than she had in The Phantom Menace, because that was really, really short. Let's see. Also, what I thought was cool was the introduction of Boba Fett among other cloned kids. So you see a lot of these children, they're also clones. They all have, just like the adult clones, different hairstyles, in order to kind of give them a certain individuality. And immediately when I saw the hair of little Yoda, of little Boba, hey, maybe that is something for season 2 of The Mandalorian. Baby Boba. Baby Boba. No, that doesn't work with the timeline. Anyway, forget what I said. So, but to see Boba Fett, and they really give him an impetus to avenge his father, because of course Mace Windu killed his father in the arena in the second prequel, but here Boba Fett teams up with someone who's much more vicious and hateful than he himself turns out to be, and so Aurra Sing really forces him and makes him do unspeakable things. And you see that Boba himself is conflicted, and so that there is still a little bit of a conscience in him. And at one point, he even really wants to walk away from it all. I really liked this introduction. I never thought they would team up these two, but it works. It totally works. And then at one point, I think that you think that Aurra Sing is dead, and then I don't think that's actually the case. Let's see. So Death Trap. There's another episode that when I read some of the other reviews, people didn't like that much. R2 Come Home. That's the penultimate episode of this season, and I really liked it. I loved it. It is, of course, a nice role for R2-D2. He's definitely the hero of that episode. Some people thought it was a little bit too funny, and it kind of changes the mood from these last 3 episodes that are pretty grim. But for me, it worked, and I love to see R2-D2 in action. There are some great moments in that one. There's one particular scene that I really loved when I think at one point he escapes, and then he wants to warn the other Jedi, and they're standing, I forgot where, maybe in Mandalore, I don't know. But anyway, R2-D2 has to come down some stairs. Now, normally, of course, you know, R2 units have big problems with stairs. That is why in the cantina, they sent the droids away in A New Hope, because, well, it was also kind of a nice Star Wars equivalent of, an interesting Star Wars equivalent of racism in the Star Wars universe, you know, no droids here. But it was also because R2-D2, they had no idea how to make R2-D2 come down the stairs. And later on, of course, in the prequels, they introduced these these rockets on both sides of R2's arms so that he can fly. And that has solved a lot of problems, and they actually use that mechanism also in the 3rd season quite a bit. So in order to come down the stairs, he may have wanted to use that. But here, he's like in such a hurry that he just like rushes down the stairs and even ignores that they're stairs. So he's like, it was just so hilarious and such a funny animated moment. It's just, there were plenty of gems like that in this episode. So I really like that one. And maybe I also love to see it because let's be honest, in the sequels, in the last 3 Star Wars movies, R2-D2 almost has nothing to do, which I never understood. Of course, I understand that they wanted to, introduce a new droid. So you've got BB-8, and you don't want too many competing droids in a certain way. But C-3PO gets a lot to do, and he in the Rise of Skywalker, he gets a very important role, whereas R2-D2 is just like in the first movie, is just standing there in a corner gathering dust. In the second movie, is almost not present. And then in the third movie, same thing. He's just there, but he has no role. And you have Dio and BB-8 and C-3PO. But I feel that that's an injustice to R2-D2. I feel that if they really wanted to wrap things up, and they did, I think in general they did a pretty good job with The Rise of Skywalker, but for R2-D2, I think that he really got a bad deal with this movie. And I know it's kind of a tricky droid to use in a movie because, well, there's limited mobility. But I just missed the banter with C-3PO, and it would have been such a nice way to finish in the same way as A New Hope kind of started this adventure with these two droids. Anyway, so that's why I really loved R2-D2 having a hero role here in this episode. And then you've got the season finale, the Lethal Trackdown, episode 222. Yeah, that was really, really good. Good action, good pacing, varied. That's another thing that I loved. It's not always the same kind of fights. Some of these episodes are very repetitive. There's a lot of shooting, a lot of laser sword fighting. But after a while, especially if you're binge watching like I am, like some of these episodes are just all the same. It's like, oh, here we go again, another shootout, and not much variation. But I think they did a pretty good job with the season finale here. A few other episodes here. You have the Zillo Beast episodes. These, if you watch it in chronological order, are moved from the place that they have in the traditional season. I like those. They were pretty interesting. A little bit King Kong story, or at least some references to the original King Kong story. I liked not so much the Beast plot, even though it was interesting. We've never seen big monsters like that in the Star Wars universe. At least, well, we've seen lots of big monsters. There's always a bigger fish, but this was more of a Godzilla-sized monster, and that was pretty cool. But what I liked most about these episodes was Dark Palpatine. He is really showing a dark side where he's willing to sacrifice his animal in order to learn how this creature can defend itself against laser swords, for instance. Lightsabers, I should say, laser swords. Anyway, and so it opposes Palpatine to those that want to protect this beast, even though it looks like a monster, but it's still a living being. So there's the value of life versus, let's just use this creature, and a more mechanical way of looking at this particular monster. And that's an interesting discussion, I think. It's also something that we are dealing with in real life, where there's this I think moral question: how do we treat animals? Do we exploit them? Do we use them? Are we allowed to do whatever we want to animals just because they're, in our eyes, a lower life form? And so we can industrialize the treatment of animals? Or should we have more respect for any living being? And well, it's a tricky balance, because of course, well, even if you eat plants and you're a vegan, then you're still eating living material. According to Thomas Aquinas, even plants have a soul, not a eternal soul, but still. So it was interesting. It's just a very brief element, I think, of these episodes, but still interesting to see them doing this in season 2. Some weaker episodes were, for me, the two Padme centric episodes, Senate Spy and Senate Murders, where Padme Amidala is trying to be a sleuth, to figure out who killed what was it? The senator, her fellow senator, you know, from the Greedo race. Forgot the name of that race. Oops, I'm really showing that I didn't do my homework. But anyway, I did like the Senate murders episode because of this kind of more Agatha Christie type of storyline. So in that way, it was a bit refreshing to see a different type of story. But the overall setting, it's just one of these episodes where it's on Coruscant and you see the same corridors and the same backgrounds over and over again. Even the first part of season 3 has a few of these episodes where, you know, we need to, Padme Amidala has to deliver a speech in the Senate. And we see that Senate Hall, which looks just like in the prequels, and I never liked that design in the prequels. It's so, I don't know, not interesting as a design. And it's used so much. And then Bail Organa has to do a speech, and then he can't do the speech, and Padme has to do a speech. There's a few episodes where it's just the same thing over and over again, and you get sick and tired of Coruscant. You just show us something more interesting, or show Coruscant from a more interesting angle. It sometimes feels really like they're rehashing the digital sets too much. But anyway, it wasn't too much of a problem because it was just 2 episodes. And then another lightweight episode for me was Lightsaber Lost, where, you know, Ahsoka learns that she needs to, you know, keep an eye on her lightsaber. Of course, that refers to the almost a Star Wars trope that Jedi keep losing their lightsabers, either because their hand is cut off, like Luke on Bespin, or when I think it's is it Obi-Wan who loses his lightsaber early on in the Phantom Menace? But that whole storyline was a little bit, I don't know, inconsequential and a little bit stretched out. I don't know. I wasn't to my liking. In general, I would say what I also liked about this series was that the battle droids are toned down quite a bit, and there is no Jar Jar. There's no Jar Jar in season 2. I'm pretty sure the Gungans will come back to haunt me, but yeah, I thought not having Jar Jar in this season 2 was almost a sign of goodwill by the makers. Like, okay, let's not do too much kiddie stuff. And I think that has allowed the series to mature and to become more interesting, I think, for also an older audience. Those were my notes about season 2. Let me know in the comments which episodes you thought were the best. Maybe I missed some of your favorite episodes. Again, just let me know in the comments. If you haven't seen my review of season 1 of the Clone Wars, then a video will appear here. And beneath it, you'll see the circle with my face in it. That is what you click if you want to subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for liking and sharing and commenting. I'll be back before you know it with my review of season 3 of the Clone Wars. Clone Wars. And very soon, we'll be at season 7. May the Force be with you. Thanks for watching.